Great. Thank you, Dana. This is Angie. I'm so pleased to be here today. I am going to start off with the first of our two presentations. And really what I'm going to do is set the stage for Vivek to talk about a really exciting project that we are working on collaboratively. So quick introduction to Portland. We have about 530,000 residents in our city and very strong population growth. Portland has been quite a popular place to move, and we anticipate that we are going to see increased growth, which of course puts pressure on our canopy as we bring in new residents. We have about 29% overall canopy cover, and as you can see from the map, it's more skewed towards heavier canopy on the west side of the city. We have a very large park, Forest Park, that's about 5,000 acres that accounts for quite a bit, but the majority of our residents live on the east side of the Willamette River. And it's very important to know how trees are regulated and what our model for tree management is in the city. So in Portland, street trees are maintained by the adjacent property owner. So yes, the property owner has to go and get a permit to do any sort of work on a street tree, but they are the ones who are going to be responsible for initiating work, paying for it, planting trees, maintaining trees, etc. And so that really has a very strong influence on how we do everything. We don't think it's a very ideal situation, but it is the model that we have to work with. And so, of course, you need to know what you have in order to manage it well. And so we decided to focus in on really quantifying and better understanding our street trees and getting a better inventory. So over time, we've had several partial or sample inventories going all the way back to the 1930s when the WPA conducted Portland's first tree inventory. And as we embarked on this process of going out and collecting data and mapping and measuring every right-of-way tree in the city, we framed our project by asking three questions. We really wanted to know, are we equitable in our distribution of street trees? Can everyone in the city benefit from canopy, and do they have access to trees in the right-of-way? We wanted to know, are we resilient? Can we be resilient to climate change, to invasive pests, to other things that may be coming our way? And lastly, are we maximizing our urban forest potential? We have a goal of 33% canopy, and we're at 29%, but truly, we probably can go higher, but for our rights-of-way in particular, are we doing the best that we can with what's out there? So in selecting our inventory method, we really wanted to choose something that not just collected data, but that really considered our regulatory model. And so we chose to really engage communities in our inventory process. And we decided, okay, let's go for it. Let's do a volunteer street tree inventory. And so we wanted to engage volunteers in the data collection, but also in what happens afterwards. And so working with our communities in policy and stewardship and in distribution of resources that comes post-inventory. Okay, so I'll tell you briefly about how we went about this. We decided to go neighborhood by neighborhood. Portland has 95 distinct neighborhoods. That's a lot of individual community groups to work with. And so we started by approaching some of our existing volunteers and existing community groups and asking them to commit to working with us for 2 years on a project to inventory their community street trees. So in the first year, we would focus on mapping and data collection, publishing results. And in the second year, we would focus on developing a tree plan and conducting stewardship events with groups in their particular communities. And so we went about this by actually getting a little bit of competition going amongst neighborhoods, asking them to apply and to really truly make a commitment to doing this project. And so groups formed what we call tree teams, and they committed to helping organize 4 work days, going out and recruiting volunteers. They had to bring 20 volunteers to each of those 4 work days. The groups provided publicity and locations, and then urban forestry, and we are part of Portland Parks and Recreation, provided all the staff, the training, equipment, food, and all of the technical support that we needed to get our inventory completed. So the data was collected by volunteers in pairs, and we trained all of our volunteers, sent them out in groups to do data collection on paper maps, and we kept the data collection pretty simple so that it could easily be collected by volunteers. So we went down to species for some trees, but often just to genus for many others. Things like maples are broken down into 6 different groupings. They collected size of each tree, a general condition rating, a specific location on the map, as well as some planting site details. All of the data entry then happens back in our office by another set of volunteers who were trained in ArcGIS data entry. Data accuracy is incredibly important, obviously, when you're doing an inventory, especially of this size. And so we ensured good accuracy by focusing on training. Volunteers had to learn not just tree ID, but also protocol. Then we established a series of checks and systems for making sure that data was accurate and giving volunteers feedback. And during the data collection days, we also engaged arborists in our communities, and we would bring 1 to 2 arborists out per group, put them on a bike, and send them out to go visit with groups. Groups could also contact them by cell phone so that they could get quick assistance with a tree ID or condition assessment. So as you can imagine, this is a big undertaking. It took us 6 years. We did it neighborhood by neighborhood. In all, 220,000 trees were inventoried from 2010 to 2016, and we engaged 1,400 volunteers who gave 17,000 hours total to the project. And we're really pleased to have wrapped it up this year. We think this is probably the 2nd largest volunteer inventory in the U.S. after New York's tree census. For those of you out there, if anyone's done anything else of this size, I'd love to hear from you, so I look forward to your comments in the chat. And for us, the inventory is just one piece. There are quite a few more products beyond this GIS database of all of our trees. So I'm going to talk about the other products first before I talk about some of our results. So engaged volunteers were really what we considered a product and an outcome of this project. So building support and a following for the work that we do, getting people engaged and talking about trees and how trees are managed in the city was just a very key outcome for us. Secondly, a neighborhood report, very specifically tailored to each neighborhood, was also produced, and it has specific recommendations based on what we found in the neighborhood. We did a lot of mapping. This is just one example. In attempting to answer that question, are we resilient? We have mapped out species that are vulnerable to pests. So this example from our Hollywood neighborhood in red, you see all of the trees that may be susceptible to Dutch elm disease, emerald ash borer, bronze birch borer, or Asian longhorn beetle. And it really helps us get across that key message of planting a diverse array of species is critical to sustaining long-term health in the urban forest. Another product was a neighborhood tree plan, and each group or tree team at the end of the inventory, once they received their results, we did a lot of workshopping with folks to sit down and talk about goals and objectives for their stewardship event. We kind of joke that Portland is the city that likes to plan. So when I say plan, please don't imagine a 20-page document. In this case, it's literally a trifold brochure. One page has a quick summary of results and findings from the inventory, a little bit on street trees, and the second side has goals and objectives that the team members have come up that are important to them, that are reflective of the findings, and that really focus on stewardship. So for example, a group may have a goal of pruning young trees to promote good structure because they have a large number of young trees in their street tree population. And this has resulted in the final product, which is really this ongoing partnership with a variety of groups. Life after tree inventory, we hope, continues for our tree teams, and so our organization has really changed the way that we do our stewardship efforts, and we're focusing them on partnerships with neighborhood groups. To make it easier for groups to get them to focus on tree issues and not necessarily about getting their group organized, we've offered them a menu. I think that working with volunteer groups, the more organized you can be and make things easy for them, the more likely they are to be successful. So we offer a menu of stewardship events that they can choose from, everything from planting, pruning, tree history, tree care, tree walks, nominating heritage trees, etc. They can choose from a variety of events, and then we will partner with them to plan and execute an event in their neighborhood. And so last year we had 25 stewardship events, such as this photo here, these folks pruning young trees in their neighborhood. And so community stewardship, again, a primary focus, and the reason being that we have to have the support and engagement of our adjacent property owners in order to manage those street trees. And we know that as groups mature and become more independent, that seed money and other resources have become important for them to conduct small projects. So we maintain a tool library, and we also offer small grants for folks. One example is our Albina neighborhood. They found that they have quite a few dead and dying cherry trees, and they really wanted to do some work to replace these for low-income property owners. So we were able to fund replacement of 5 street trees for low-income property owners, and they were able to take that tiny bit of seed money and small project and really pitch it and turn it into a successful larger grant application, and now they are doing that same work but on a much larger scale with support from a different organization in their neighborhood. Okay, sorry, my slides are a bit out of order. I'm going to flip around here. Okay, so that's a summary of sort of the stewardship and community involvement end. Some of you may be asking, well, what kind of results do you get about the composition and the structure of your street tree population? So I'll present a couple of the key findings. I think a lot of these are probably pretty common in other cities. It's not particularly unique. I think a lot of us face these issues. We knew that we were probably inequitably distributed, but we were able to really quantify that with our street trees. And so getting those numbers and those maps down have been really helpful to us. So when it comes to street trees, if you look at just stocking level, in our central city areas, our more affluent areas, we're about 80% stocked with street trees. Some neighborhoods up to 90%. But then as we start to look at our lower income areas, our less developed areas of the city, where our communities of color are, our stocking level drops down to 30% in those areas. So clearly a huge disparity in who has street trees and also the size of those street trees. The more mature, larger form trees, again, tend to be in those more affluent neighborhoods. Answering our question again, are we resilient? We have a bit of a diversity problem. So we have low diversity overall. Just like many cities, just a handful of species and genera are contributing to the majority of the street trees out there. So maples in particular are overrepresented. So 27% of our street trees are maples. And we know that that puts us at risk for potential pests and problems down the road. We have very few evergreens, not just conifers, but broadleaves, less than 4% citywide. And in Portland, it's fairly temperate. We can grow quite a few different species. We should be able to diversify the palette of trees that we are offering and planting in the right way. In terms of are we maximizing the space that we have very few large trees over 24 inches in diameter, and many of our large sites are planted with small form trees, so lots of lost opportunity. And one of the biggest experiments for us was really, and I put it in key findings, it's not data, but it is that last bullet, that volunteers are truly worth the effort. Of course, it costs money to work with volunteers, and probably we know that it did cost us more to use this particular model than it would have if we were to just go out and collect the data on our own. But the net benefit is so much greater. We were truly able to just get so much more support and continue the project beyond data collection that it has been worth all of the efforts and the funds. So taking the data and the findings and putting it into use is a whole nother challenge. If you've ever worked with a group of volunteers or citizen scientists who go out and collect data, your experience should be that they demand much faster utilization of all the information that they've collected. Those volunteers are not going to wait the 6 years that it took us to collect all this information to put it into use. And so very early in the inventory, we had enough information to really quantify some of our challenges and just start making changes. And so we updated our approved street tree planting list very early. And the first thing we did was remove maples completely from planting in the right-of-way. And we have not planted maples in the right-of-way for about 4 years now. We've also added new species, more evergreens, other things to address the diversity issue, and that's assisted with diversifying some of our plantings. On the back end, we're migrating data into an asset management system, and we have a plan now to re-inventory every 10 years. Those pieces, while they're focused in much of that internal management, the fact that we have all of this support from our community to continue and maintain a better inventory have just contributed to making that part of our long-term planning. The data that we have now informs our strategies and plans. So, for example, we have set some planting targets with our large planting programs. For example, we are setting goals for how many large form trees we plant, evergreen trees, native trees, and really focusing resources into low canopy and low income areas. So none of this is without its challenges. When it comes to stewardship, this is a very time and resource intense model. And in some ways, when you're actively doing the inventory, you have a lot of momentum and interest. And when that part of the project is over, it can be challenging to maintain that long-term momentum with groups. So we're interested to see how that works out in our community. Developing trust and engaging our underrepresented communities continues to be a challenge for us. We have, in particular, we're concerned when it comes to planting. We've heard from some groups that, for example, trees can sometimes symbol gentrification, and in a city that's growing and changing rapidly, sometimes folks see tree plantings as a sign that housing prices may go up. And so they are a bit, we have heard folks voice concerns about that. So I think developing trust with our communities is really key. And also the fact that we are assigning maintenance to the adjacent property owner. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that planting a tree does cause a financial burden potentially. And we need to work very hard to make sure that we are not doing harm to our most vulnerable communities. And so the big question now is that, yes, we know that we have a distribution problem when it comes to canopy. And we also know that we have a ton of planting spaces. We're talking about tens of thousands of planting sites in the right-of-way alone. We have a lot more potential when it comes to private land, lots of opportunities there as well. And we want to be able to really look at these abundant planting opportunities and think about how we can be strategic and really use our limited resources best. And we want to continue that involvement with our affected communities. And so these two planting sites, one, this big wide strip, seems like a quick, easy answer. A tiny little planting strip, a little more challenging. And in Portland, we have 60 miles of completely unpaved roads and many, many more streets with unimproved rights-of-way with either no curb or no sidewalk. So we have been partnering with Portland State, wanting to use their expertise to help guide us in a very open public participation process to develop a citywide strategy to really look at all of the programs that we use to plant trees and think about how we can work together to best meet citywide goals, to expand canopy where it's most needed, and to be effective and, of course, responsible with the funds that we have. And I'm going to let Vivek talk about that project next.